I'm Alexandra Phillips. I'm the Green Party member of the European Parliament for the South East region of England.
Now, you're visiting Redhill today. What is the purpose of the visit here?
The visit to Redhill today is to focus on the Green vote that's already here. So there are very many councillors who've been elected recently in Redhill, but also to listen to people's concerns and to try and explain to them, what I'm doing as their member of the European Parliament and how that fits in tangibly with their lives. We're calling it a Green New Deal tour because that's been my real focus as an MEP so far, and I'm launching a report during this tour later next week in two of the different places, and that's really about investment in local areas for jobs. So it would see a huge amount of investment in renewable energies and energy efficiency measures, which would not only provide local jobs here in Redhill for people, but it would also take those people in Redhill who are currently in fuel poverty out of that fuel poverty. And we know that very many people die even here because of fuel poverty every winter.
And what are the chances that what you're proposing in this document will actually come about? What influence do you have?
Well, Greens in the European Parliament have a huge influence. So we are the fourth largest group, and there are 75 of us in that group. And we've got a big clout, I would say, because even the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, she has come up with her work plan for the next 5 years. And as part of that work plan, actually central to it is something that she's named a European Green Deal. Now, that won't be exactly what I want, but the fact that she's even talking about it and she's going to be working on it signals that Greens have a huge amount of sway in the European Parliament, and we just need to ensure that she gets that right, because we don't have very much time left. The IPCC report a couple of years ago explained that we only have 18 months left to put a plan in place to tackle climate change, and that plan should lead to a net zero carbon world, Europe, UK, by 2030, and that's really what I'm working towards.
So you can work on things as far as the UK and Europe are concerned, but what about other countries around the world? What about America, where Mr. Trump supposedly doesn't believe in climate change? Or what about China, where there are still a lot of coal-fired power stations and the like?
I think Europe as a whole needs to lead the way on climate change, and it's not doing enough. So even the Paris Agreement, which was in 2015, those targets are not being met by Europe. So I think only then can Europe then encourage other continents, countries to follow suit.
Now, there have been the demonstrations in London over the last couple of weeks or so by Extinction Rebellion, or XR. How effective are those, and do you think that their demands are realistic?
Well, look, we are in a climate emergency. We can't ring 999 now and ask for the fire brigade and the ambulance and the police to come in 30 years' time. Action needs to happen now, and I think it's right that Extinction Rebellion used different tactics, including disruption. And I think most of the time their targets have been the right ones. Recently, they did target a tube, however, and I don't agree with targeting public transport or working class people. I think the target should be always those who are in a position to change things and who are doing the wrong thing. So, for example, governments, the top of big banks, the top of big businesses, and that's really where they should be focusing their targets.
I think that's an interesting point, because I know many people, they're trying to do their bit. They buy the bags for go shopping so that they're not using the bags you chuck away. They're perhaps using public transport more, but those are only little things. And I know some people say that every little bit helps, but you still need the government at a bigger level to do a lot more, because everything that the likes of the shoppers around us here in Redhill maybe save can go in just one air flight, say, to America or something.
I think that's right, and I think big businesses, if you take flights, for example, most people in this country in a given year do not take a plane. We're talking about 70% of people taking 15 really doing not very much damage at all, and the 30% who are binge flying, doing the vast amount of damage. And it's those people that we need to be focusing on, and a lot of that is around big companies and binge flying people around the world, which is no longer needed. I mean, technology has advanced so much just in the last 2 or 3 years, and we don't need to physically be in the same room as colleagues now. We can effectively have meetings and conferences from all over the globe. So I think technology has caught up, but unfortunately a lot of politicians still and big business are still in the previous century and are not yet where we need to be.
You are a member of the European Parliament. As an MEP, what is your job? I've often wondered this.
Well, I suppose there are lots of elements of the job. Part of it is voting on different things. We also get given work in our different committees, and I sit on the Employment Committee, the Environment Committee and the Women's Rights Committee in the European Parliament. And as part of my role on the Employment Committee, for example, just last week I managed to secure funds for workers in the UK to help them if we indeed do crash out and have a no-deal Brexit. So that's a very tangible thing that people will receive here. Those workers who are most affected will receive extra funds to help them for a period of time if we do crash out. So that's quite a tangible thing. I mean, we sit on delegations as well, and the 2 delegations that I'm on focus on Africa, and all of my committee work and my delegation work really ties into a Green New Deal, because we need to bring other continents with us on a green journey, and we cannot carry on exploiting different continents for their minerals or their work. And I think what we really need to be looking at is things like climate reparations, because climate change is a global issue, and so even if Europe were doing its thing, it needs to help other continents who are maybe not as well off to also be able to get there as well.
So your role as an MEP, do you tend to spend more time in Brussels or Strasbourg than the UK?
Well, my family is still in the UK, so I do come. I kind of go to Brussels most of the time. So, say 3 weeks out of 4, I'll be in Brussels, but I'll be there maybe Monday afternoon to Friday morning, and then I come back and I'm here. Well, actually in Brighton, where I live, between Friday and Monday with my family, and then 1 week out of 4, so just once a month, I go to Strasbourg, which is a special voting session, and there the week's a bit different. So it's first thing Monday morning I'm off to Strasbourg, and then I usually come back on Thursday evening, so it's a bit of a different week for me those weeks, but it does allow me time to spend in the region as well, speaking to people, listening to their concerns, and I think also trying to make the EU and MEPs kind of closer to everyday people, because a lot of the fallout that we've seen over recent years around Europe has been because people don't know who their MEPs are or what they're working on, and part of my role, I think, as an MEP is to try and change that.
And the dreaded B word, Brexit. I think if certain people had their way, MEPs will be out of a job by the 31st of October, but that doesn't seem to be the case. How long do you think you will be an MEP? Well,
honestly, I think I'm going to be an MEP for 5 years. We have seen extension date after extension date after extension date. I think this is the 3rd extension date that hasn't been achieved, and I'm really pleased about that, because now that we have a tangible deal in Boris Johnson's dreadful deal, in my opinion, at least we have something that we can then take back to the people so that they can have a final say on something specific or remaining in the EU. And I think that's just a reasonable, logical next step for this country to take.
So a general election or a separate second referendum?
I think we need a second separate referendum. We may have a general election, but I think that needs to happen after we've certainly got rid of any worry around crashing out without a deal, and that is not completely off the table yet, because it can still happen at the end of any transition period. So I'm very firmly in the camp of we need a people's vote before a general election. Now, a people's vote would take at least 6 months.
And what do you think the chances are of that taking place, a second referendum?
I think we are closer now than ever of having a people's vote, and there's a huge amount of sway and energy behind that now, not only with the demonstrations that we saw take place in London just a couple of weekends ago, but also in Parliament itself. Now there are very many parliamentarians who are on the side of a people's vote because they see as well that that's the rational thing to do.
Thank you very much for talking to us.